Welcome back to The Big Picture. My guest is Vic Martucci, and we are talking politics. And we did leave off with talking about Biden and Trump. Mm-hmm. And one of the points that you had made was that Biden has a low profile and it may be working for him right now just to kind of be low key. Is he going to be able to successfully maintain that through November, or is that going to work against him?
I believe Joe Biden has already agreed to 2 or 3 debates with the president. So he's not going to be able to maintain a low profile entirely. And how he performs in those debates are going to be absolutely critical because his performance on social media platforms, recorded videos, has been uneven. He seems unsure of himself. He loses his train of thought. And we all recall what happened to Ronald Reagan in 1984 in the first debate against Walter Mondale.
Disaster.
Reagan was cruising to re-election until that debate.
Right.
And he looked confused, he looked befuddled, and it was like somebody put up a wall. And all of his momentum stopped because people were concerned that maybe the president was getting too old. And then, of course, the next debate, he won easily, and he used that famous line with Walter Mondale. Right. I will not make age an issue in this campaign. I will not say you're too young to be president.
Right, and yeah, I mean, and the rest is history.
Yeah. So,
literally.
But to answer your question, those debates are going to be critical for Joe Biden. If he's in command, if he's sure of himself, and there are no questions about his stamina and his ability to serve, then that's going to be a major test for him. It's going to go a long way to help him win.
In my opinion, there's 2 things that are going to be really important or essential in determining what happens in the presidential race in November. And that is, number 1, are the people who voted for him in the last election, Trump, have any of them changed their mind? Did he lose the people who believed in him, or did he do what he promised he was going to do? That's number 1. Mm-hmm. Number 2, is the energy of the country on either side stronger in terms of getting out the vote?
So the answer to the first question is, so far, according to the polling that I've looked at, no, he has not lost people that were part of his winning coalition in 2016. The second question is the most important question, voter intensity. And it's really hard to predict that this far out. I'll say this, the turnout at his Tulsa rally is troubling for the president. He never has had trouble drawing big crowds. And I know there's a lot of speculation about what happened, and whether there was a lot of mischief with
Cortez,
young people.
She did tweet that they
reserving blocks of tickets
it,
so Trump supporters couldn't buy them. But the president himself said, no, that wasn't the case. It was because of the negative media and the threat of protests and all of that. It wasn't a good look because the president has always been able to count on the intensity of his voters. So time will tell.
Okay. The unrest and the protests, and there were some outside of his rally, and there were some outside of his rally in Arizona. Mm-hmm. The unrest is one of the issues that we're seeing. It's always been troubling in this country when something happens and anger breaks out and violence, and I mean, the people who peacefully demonstrate, I always have sympathy when the violence breaks out and their message kind of gets lost. Because then everybody connects it with the violence, and
right.
Some of the people that I've talked to who are angry say, well, the violence helps because that gets things changed, and without the violence we wouldn't have the progress that we've been seeing. That remains to be, that's an opinion,
right.
Whatever you can
right.
come down on either side. But the intensity of the the protest and the anger and the taking over in Seattle and all the, is that being kind of spiked by outside interests, or is that really pure on its own?
Well, I think it's organic. I really do, and I think it's always been there. From a political standpoint, though, that's where it becomes dangerous for the Democrats and Joe Biden. Although the recent polling shows that Black Lives Matters movement, for example, polls very well, almost 60% approval. So do police. The image of police has not been severely hampered by all of this. So, you know, the danger for the Democrats and Joe Biden is that they that they get too close to the radical protest movement. I'll give you another example. While people believe, greater than 50% of Americans believe that there's systemic racism in this country and there's a problem with policing in general, over 65% are opposed to defunding police. And so, you know, again, the Democrats have to walk that fine line between supporting peaceful protest and real and rational reform for police, and going to the far left and talking about defunding police, because that won't sell well.
Well, in your business, you guys rely heavily on polling and research, and in the past, especially in the last presidential election, the polling was problematic, and you know there were a lot of surprises. And polling, in my experience, is very complicated when it comes to who does it and why they do it and who hires them and how it's conducted. It can be manipulated, and it can be quite unreliable depending on if there's an agenda behind it. Now, I just read an article, I don't have it in front of me, but I just read an article about it from a reporter with the Los Angeles Times, and he was talking about Biden and Trump, and he was talking about negatives and positives. And one of the things that he quoted in the article was that approval ratings, so many people approved of Biden and so many people approved of Trump or disapproved. But the way it was phrased, and it kind of struck me because the way it was phrased really didn't have anything to do with how these people would vote. In other words, you can approve of Biden as opposed to Hillary Clinton, for instance. I mean, you could say Hillary Clinton was unlikable, and I don't approve of her because I don't like her, she's shady or whatever. Joe Biden, yeah, he's a nice guy, I approve of him. Would you vote for him? No, you know, he's got too many, you know, gaffes, and it doesn't seem like he could run the country or whatever. So the approval rating in that particular instance struck me as not being relevant.
Yeah, I think each question in a poll is only relevant in terms of historically how that translates into the final vote. Approval has an impact, but people vote the way they vote for a lot of different reasons. What's critical to me is that, and you know, there was this, and we've talked about this before on this show, there was a lot of talk 4 years ago that the polling was wrong when Trump won. Well, no, the polling was dead on. It depended on what polling you were looking at. The national polls had Hillary up 2 to 3 points on Election Day, and I believe she won by 2.5 percentage points. The polling that people were ignoring were the trends in the polling at the state level in the battleground states, and if you paid attention to that, you shouldn't have been surprised at the outcome.
Okay, so there is, now that being said, are there instances where somebody wants a poll that says, you know, this guy is so far ahead, and the purpose of the poll is to get voters for that guy to say, well, I don't need to go out and vote because he doesn't need my vote. He's so far ahead, you know, we'll let it Go.
Yeah, well, campaigns use polling that way. They do what's called push polling, where they load up the questions and elicit the answer that they want to get.
Right.
But the reputable polling services in this country don't do that. But you have to understand how to read a poll. You can get anything you want out of the data, but some polling firms poll all registered voters. Some just poll likely voters. Likely voters is probably a better predictor.
Okay.
Some poll don't even check for voter registration.
Well, we only have a minute left. How would somebody out there who's going to look at polls or listen and be mildly interested, how does someone know whether it's going to be an unbiased poll that should be accurate?
Well, again, what I do is I look at that Real Clear Politics consolidation of polls. It's a website called Real Clear Politics, and they average all the polls. And typically, when you average things out, you compensate for biases and different polling techniques. They're pretty reliable, and that's what I was looking at 4 years ago when I said that I could see a path for Trump to win, because I was watching those trends in the battleground states.
Okay. Well, all right. You know, we're out of time, but this never gets never gets old. Politics is, like people around here say, you know, one of the second most violent contact sports.
Full contact sport.
Anyway, thank you for watching WBBZ-TV, as always, and thanks for watching The Big Picture. And we will see you next time on The Big Picture.